I served in Vietnam in 1967 and 1968. I originally enlisted in the Marine Corps and went to boot camp in San Diego and various infantry training units. Also was sent to a communications school because they found out I had a college degree in radio and television from Arkansas State. So I was enlisted for almost a year, and when they found out I had a college degree, they decided that I needed to go to officer candidate school, which I subsequently did, and went through officer candidate school and then on to what the Marine Corps calls the basic school, which is 23 weeks of infantry training for brand new second lieutenants. And the reason I enlisted in the beginning was because our country needed Marines, soldiers, Navy personnel, because we were actively engaged in combat in Vietnam. I worked at Channel 8 Television in Jonesboro. I was originally hired there to produce commercials. I also did the weather at 10 o'clock each night, and did that until I enlisted in the Marine Corps. Well, the majority of it, I would have to say, would have been combat training, as most Marines go through. I did attend a communications school after I got out of boot camp. And then when I attended OCS and basic school in Quantico, Virginia, that was approximately 23 weeks of strictly combat training. After the basic school to Vietnam, there were approximately 500 lieutenants in my basic school class, and of those 500, approximately 70% of us were sent straight to Vietnam after a very, very short leave. I think the thing that struck me the most upon arriving in Vietnam, when I got off the airplane, it was the odor or the smell. It was very distinctive and somewhat annoying. Nothing like I'd ever smelled before. But that's the thing that struck me the most. That and the heat. It was pretty hot. I think probably the single most memorable experience for me was the day I got wounded. That's kind of hard to forget, but certainly that was memorable, to me at least. But I think that one of the most memorable things for me, and something that I was extremely proud of, was being able to lead Marines in combat. I had approximately 55 young men in my platoon. Average age was about 19. I had some 17. But to be able to lead them in combat was extremely memorable for me, and something I'll never forget. I had my platoon out on patrol one day, and we were just walking along doing what we do, and my right foot hit what's called a tripwire, and that tripwire is connected to an explosive that's buried in the ground. We called them booby traps. I don't know where that term came from, but anyway, when my foot pulled on the wire, the explosive in the ground blew up and kind of blew me up with it. But that's pretty much what happened. The other thing I thought about the most, as well as everybody else that was over there at the time, was trying to stay alive and trying to get home safely. Far too many of the people that served in Vietnam didn't come home. And you know, it was a day-to-day thing because you were active every day doing something, on patrols or involved in operations. And the thing, as far as I was concerned, was to try to keep my men as safe as they could be, keep them out of harm's way, and still continue to do our job. Well, past the time, let's see. There wasn't a lot of free time to begin with. What little free time we did have when we weren't in the field operating generally was spent writing letters back home, cleaning weapons, which was very, very important on a daily basis. But suffice it to say, there just wasn't a great deal of free time to be spent. But we took advantage of every free moment we had, believe me. In Vietnam, I went straight up north near the DMZ, the demilitarized zone, to a hill where my battalion was. The hill was called Con Tien, and it was pretty desolate because we were only 2,000 meters from the North Vietnamese across the DMZ, and they took, we took artillery fire and rocket attacks on that hill nearly every day. And the engineers had been kind enough, because we lived in bunkers up there and had trenches dug so that we could get from one place to another. And the engineers had built individual, what should I call this, outhouses. And they were very small. They were like one-man outhouses. And there was only one per platoon. But they'd built several of them around that hill. And when I got there, my platoon's outhouse was the only one still standing, because the rest of them had been hit by artillery and so forth. This was very close to Christmas, and one of my Marines in the mail got a package from his parents that had a miniature Christmas tree in it. And he and one of his buddies took this little Christmas tree, and the tree was packed in miniature marshmallows, which was pretty much common in Vietnam. It was the greatest thing to pack stuff with miniature marshmallows. They strung these miniature marshmallows together with a piece of string, dipped them in Kool-Aid, and strung them around the tree. The tree's only about this tall. And then they took it out and placed it on top of our outhouse. At 2:30 that afternoon, our outhouse got blown away because I think they saw that Christmas tree from across the DMZ and they just zeroed in on it. So we lost our Christmas tree. Well, again, I think the thing that stuck with me the most was the day I got wounded. But one of the things that has always stuck with me since that time was the courage and the discipline and so forth of the Marines that I had the opportunity to lead. As I said, they were very young. Some of them just out of high school. And they did things that were uncommon for most people. They never refused to do anything that I asked them to do, and they did it to the best of their ability, and that has certainly stuck with me over the years. Well, after I was wounded badly enough that I wasn't able to stay in country in Vietnam. I was sent to a hospital in Japan where I stayed for almost a month. And then they flew me home to the United States, to the Naval Hospital in Memphis, Tennessee, where I stayed for another 4 months. So I came home virtually on my back in an airplane, but I know that of the people who spent their full tour in Vietnam, which was normally 13 months, I know when they came home, it was not what you'd call a happy homecoming. There were several people in this country that thought we shouldn't be there to begin with. There was a lot of protesting that went on about the Vietnam War. We knew about it when we were there, but we just ignored it. We were doing our job, we were doing our duty, and that's what mattered to us the most. But when they came home, they weren't greeted the way you would expect someone who had been in a war for 13 months to be greeted. They were spit upon. Many of them got in fights with people who didn't like the fact that they'd been to Vietnam. So it wasn't a happy homecoming for most all of them. No parades, none of that, but still, they knew they'd done their job, and that was what was important to them.